Thanks to High Orion Spur channel for this video images. This video is a remake. I had a copyright strike, so this is a redo video. Thank you.
The hells that they are creating for themselves with their own thoughts and emotions and beliefs about themselves or about God. Like, why does God allow evil? Why does God allow evil?
3, 2, 1.
This is a Penguinati production.
Today, I'd like to tackle a question that I've been asked a lot lately. There is no judgment. There is no judgment.
She's going to explain what happens to the killers and the rapists and the evil people.
Even some of the most evil people who have lived were simply playing a role that was asked of them to provide a catalyst for human evolution. They have a near-death experience, they go to the other side, they have a life review, and God doesn't judge them. So does God just allow us to do whatever we want and get away with it? Many times I see that life is like a play, or a video game, or even a dream. It's been described as a roller coaster ride. In reality that we enter by choice, we choose our roles, and depending on the person, the reason why we do this could vary. It could be to experience a challenge, to grow spiritually, to have an adventure, to have a physical experience with the five senses. But the overarching reason is always about love. To learn about love, to experience love, to express love, to expand love. What we do here is very important. There's nothing that we can really do to be lost, to surprise God, or to make him angry, to deserve judgment, or some would even say to hurt ourselves or others. We are safe, guided, and loved. We ask each other to come here and play difficult roles, to challenge ourselves. Even some of the most evil people who have lived were simply playing a role that was asked of them to provide a catalyst for human evolution. And while these answers may be satisfactory for many of us, to me, I find them very comforting because I had a near-death-like experience and I woke up on the other side and felt how incredible it is that we are all safe and guided and loved. But these answers are not satisfactory for everybody, and that is completely understandable because there are so many people who have experienced severe trauma and abuse at the hands of other human beings. And many people are asking questions like this in my comments section. So does God just allow us to do whatever we want and get away with it? Aren't there consequences for hurting and abusing people? What about child molesters, rapists, murderers, serial killers? And these questions deserve answers. I'm going to say up front that the answers that I am going to present in this video may not be satisfactory to everyone. And that's okay. I'm just going to be throwing a lot of information at you guys and sharing with you how it makes sense to me. At the end of the day, there is still a lot that we don't know. And to pretend that we do, to pretend that we have the answers to some of life's deepest questions, like why does God allow evil? We can do the best we can to answer these questions, but that's all it will ever be. It will be our best effort. Today we're going to look for answers from two sources: near-death experiences and Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. These are the two books that I'm going to be quoting from in the second half of this video. Dr. Michael Newton did regressive hypnosis therapy, where over the course of his career, he regressed thousands of people back between their lifetimes to see what happens in the interim. And the information that he and others like him have gotten is overwhelmingly telling the same story. The details line up. They correspond with what near-death experiences teach. So we're going to look at all this information and we're going to try to answer the questions. Is there judgment on the other side? And if not, what happens to those who commit evil acts? Do they just get away with it? One final note before we begin, we're going to be looking at a few hellish near-death experiences, although not in great depth. But just be aware in case this type of a thing is disturbing for you. Also, I want to give a trigger warning as we will be looking at a couple of suicide attempts that resulted in hellish near-death experiences. But I think that the conclusions that we will draw at the end are well worth the listen and will leave us in a place of confidence that God is both loving and just. He is capable and trustworthy to handle anything that we could throw at him, and that the universe is indeed a safe and benevolent place.
This is not in your Bibles.
So let's start at square one. What do we know from the overwhelming majority of near-death experience accounts? The overwhelming majority of near-death experience accounts that I have read and listened to agree that there is no judgment on the other side. And then if you ask them, well, does that mean that you can just do whatever you want and get away with it? Their response will come back something like this. Well, yes, you can do whatever you want in this life. We have free will. God isn't going to supernaturally intervene and control your choices. However, when you cross over to the other side, you will have a life review. And in that life review, you will have to experience all the pain and hurt that you caused every other living being, as if you were that person. And you will also experience the ripple effect of the pain and hurt that those people caused others. So you will be on the receiving end of all the pain and hurt that you caused in your entire lifetime, and you will judge yourself. God doesn't judge you. God unconditionally loves and supports you through this process. You judge yourself. You judge yourself. Some near-death experiencers will say that this is as far as it goes, that the life review is the judgment, and having gone through it themselves, they can say, that's enough. It's fair. You experienced the hurt that you gave out, and that's a fair consequence. Other near-death experiencers will say that after undergoing a life review, people will then decide, I really screwed up, I need to go back and right my wrongs, and they'll plan another life, sometimes with the people that they wronged to switch roles, sometimes to put themselves in a situation to experience in a physical lifetime the exact pain that they dished out in their previous lifetime, all for the purpose of developing an understanding of what it's like to be on the receiving end of that pain, bringing balance to the situation, balancing the karma, experiencing the consequences, whatever you want to call it, and also developing compassion to ensure that they never make these mistakes again. So there's a couple of things we can draw out of this. First, when near-death experiencers say there is no judgment, they're saying there is no judgment in the very specific sense that many of us who were raised in religion were taught, that God is up there sitting on his throne waiting to send us to either heaven or hell. But clearly, as attested over and over, there is a type of judgment, self-judgment. We judge ourselves. This means that we are far more aware and advanced beings than we often realize here. We get over there, we wake up, and we say, oh boy, what was I thinking? I forgot who I was and I wasted all this time living an unloving life. Now I have to go back and right my wrongs. And what does this entail? Here's where we're going to get into some specific stories. All of these near-death experience accounts that I'm going to reference will be linked in the description for you to check out if you so choose, except for one, which I will note. We'll start with the story of a woman named Sharon who committed suicide. She found herself in a dark and hellish place where she could feel the pain that she had caused her family by leaving prematurely. A voice spoke to her and told her to turn around and look for the light. She is given a choice to return to her life and complete her mission, but she was told that had she stayed, she would have to continue to suffer her family's grief over her loss, either until the time that she was supposed to have been on earth was completed, or her family had forgiven her, whichever happened first. Thomas Mellon Benedict, a very well-known near-death experiencer, was an atheist when he died and found himself alone, trapped in darkness. He called out for help, and he heard a voice tell him to look for the light. The voice directed him to look for the light within himself, and once he had done that, he was able to make the connection between the light within him and the great light that all near-death experiencers speak of, and then he was able to see and travel towards the light and leave the hellish realm. Angie Fenimore committed suicide and found herself in a hellish realm, which she describes as a gray space of nothingness. She was surrounded by people who could not see her or hear her and didn't seem to be aware of each other's presence. She heard a voice say, "Is this what you really want?" And she became aware of the light, which she recognized as God, which was shining and speaking thunderously to her outside the hellish realm. She then became aware of another being of light who she identified as Jesus Christ, who had been next to her in hell the whole time, but she could not perceive him until she opened her eyes and mind to the light, and she ended up leaving hell with Jesus Christ. Howard Storm was, by his own description, an angry atheist and not a nice person. He followed what ended up being malevolent beings into hell, where he spent what felt like an eternity before it crossed his mind to call out to God for help. And of course, most of us know the story. When he did so, Jesus Christ appeared to him and rescued him from hell, and Howard was sent back to his life on earth. There is a near-death experience story that I read years ago, and this is the one, unfortunately, I cannot remember where I read it to track it down and give you guys a source for it. But it was the story of somebody who had not lived a good life and died and found himself in a hellish realm. He was there for what felt like an eternity before he was given a choice. Stay here or go back to earth and work off your karma. Live a hard life. Be the recipient of the actions that you dished out previously. And this person chose to come back to earth and right his wrongs. Derek Riddle died and went to a hell-like place, where he saw souls in line to be reincarnated. The ones who had done horrible things in life, like pedophiles and rapists, were in the back. They had to wait a really long time in this miserable hell-like environment before they were given the chance to go back to Earth and get it right. And they were going to have to keep coming back over and over until they did get it right. And how do you get it right? According to Derek, it has nothing to do with what you believe. It's about who you are. What's in your heart? Are you a good person? How do you treat people? Rachel Dempster died and immediately went to a heavenly place. But while in that heavenly place, she thought to herself, I wonder where the bad people go. She was instantly transported to a stereotypical fire and brimstone hell-like environment where people were undergoing torments. And when she had seen enough, she was transported out. This is just a brief sampling of the hellish near-death experience stories that I have heard and read, but it helps to set the stage. Even though the majority of near-death experiencers do not experience hell and say there is no judgment except for the life review and maybe coming back to Earth to experience karma, there are still many people who do have a hellish experience. And all the studies show that there's really no correlation between how a person lives their life, what religion they are, etc., and whether or not they have a hellish experience. Maybe they did live a bad life and they freely admit this. Maybe they believe they deserve to be there. According to David Girelli, somebody who has studied hellish near-death experiences in depth, people who close their eyes during their life review and refuse to experience the consequences of what they dish out in life. can find themselves in a hellish realm until they're willing to take responsibility for their choices. Other times people may end up there simply because they're curious, like with Rachel Dempster, or maybe to bring a message back, or for whatever reason they personally need to have that experience. Some people may end up there because they're in a really dark and depressed state of mind, state of being, and they're unable to perceive the light because their own mind is so wrapped in darkness. But clearly, in some cases, it would appear that for those who live unloving, selfish lives, there is some type of consequences. And there seems to be different types of hellish experiences that people can have. There's total darkness and isolation. There is a realm where people may be together but unaware of each other's presence. And some have even seen a place of fire and torment. Arthur Jensen, who had a heavenly near-death experience, was shown that there are different vibrational levels in the afterlife. And people are sort of naturally drawn to the level where they feel more comfortable, where they fit in the best. According to Arthur Jensen, the master vibration which upholds the heavenly realms would be too intense and would actually put a dark soul in danger of annihilation. One of the most fascinating near-death experience accounts that I have ever heard is from a woman by the name of Sarah, who was interviewed on the Art Bell Show in 1999. She saw some of these levels that Arthur Jensen talks about and that other near-death experiencers have described. In her experience, she first viewed a realm similar to what Angie Fenimore experienced. She saw a shadowy realm where people were unaware of each other's presence, each of them lost in their own darkness. She then saw a stereotypical fiery hell where people were tormenting each other, similar to what Howard Storm and Rachel Dempster saw. And Sarah was shown that these people were here by choice, that the door was open and they could leave any time if they wanted to. Then Sarah went on to see a heavenly paradise, which she was unable to enter. If I remember correctly, it said she didn't have enough experience to enter or something like that. She went on to experience the light and ultimately to return to her life on earth. What do we learn from all this? There are different places that people can go in the afterlife, and some of them are places of suffering. And sometimes these places of suffering do seem to be connected to the way that people have lived their lives, or their state of mind upon entering the afterlife, what they think they deserve, the hells that they are creating for themselves with their own thoughts and emotions and beliefs about themselves or about God. If we take these stories at face value, these people don't appear to be undergoing judgment. They most likely need to undergo some healing or some type of spiritual evolution or awakening in order to have the desire to leave that place. Calling out to God or Jesus, or simply becoming aware, remembering God's existence at times, or looking for the light is always, in 100% of stories that I've read, a surefire way out of a hellish realm. We do see hints in many of these stories that people are required to return to their lives and right their wrongs. Now let's look at a second source, Michael Newton's books. What we're going to find is that the subjects that Michael Newton interviewed basically say the same things that near-death experiencers say, except from a far more comprehensive and organized point of view. Michael Newton discusses at length, or I should say his subjects in telling their stories discuss at length, how the vast majority of humans are spiritually mature enough and responsible enough to direct their own evolution, with guidance, of course. Most of us wake up on the other side, have our life review, sit down with our guides and the elders, and go, oh wow, I could have done this and this and this so much better. And we want to jump right back in and do it over. And oftentimes people's guides will have to hold them back and say, no, take a break, get healed and rested up before you jump back in, because you'll be more likely to be successful. So for the vast majority of people, it does seem that there is no need for God to judge us because we are so quick to take responsibility for ourselves. But what about people who inflict real harm? What about rapists, serial killers, child molesters? What about Hitler? Taken from Journey of Souls, page 45. There are souls who have been so severely damaged that they are detached from the mainstream of souls, going back to a spiritual home base. Compared to all returning entities, the number of these abnormal souls is not large. However, what has happened to them on Earth is significant because of the serious effects they have on other incarnated souls. Dr. Newton goes on to say that in the case of souls that have been subverted by or had complicity with criminal abnormalities in a human body, that the guides of these souls will isolate them and they will go through a process of rehabilitation. Michael Newton, in his books, mentions 3 paths that damaged souls, or souls that have committed monstrous acts in this life, may take. First is rehabilitation. Some immature souls may go into isolation or isolation with others like them, a type of purgatory for restructuring self-awareness. I can't help but wonder if this purgatory may be like one or more of the hell-like realms that near-death experiencers have described, such as Angie Fenimore or Sarah. On page 94 of Destiny of Souls, one of Dr. Newton's subjects talks about a place called the City of Shadows, where severely damaged souls are taken. It is here where negative energy is erased. Since this is the place where so many souls are concentrated who have negative energy, it is dark to those of us outside. We can't go into this place where souls who have been associated with horror are undergoing alteration, and we would not want to go there anyway. We also know that souls who are taken to this arena are not exonerated. Eventually, in some way, they must redress the wrongs they perpetrated on others. This brings to mind Derek Riddle's experience of a hellish place where people were waiting for a long time, undergoing rehabilitation, facing the consequences of their actions, slowly having that darkness melted off of them as they waited for a chance to reincarnate and right their wrongs. Number 2 is remodeling. On page 102, Dr. Newton speaks with somebody who works in between lives with severely damaged souls, those who have committed atrocities on Earth. We work with habitually cruel lifestyles. These souls are then given a choice. We will do our best to clear out their energy by rehabilitation, and if we think they are salvageable, they are offered a choice to come back to Earth in roles where they will receive the same type of pain they caused, only multiplied. Dr. Newton asks, I thought karmic justice was not punitive. There's that idea again of no judgment. The subject responds, it's not. The offer represents an opportunity for stabilization and redemption. It usually will take more than one life to endure an equal measure of the same kind of pain they caused to many people. So imagine in Hitler's case, how many lifetimes he would have to experience in order to be on the receiving end of all the pain that he dished out. The subject goes on to say that many souls refuse this option because they are afraid of falling into old habits and performing evil acts again in future lives. So instead, they may choose to be remodeled. Their dark and damaged energy is massively diluted. Not completely, they hold on to about 10% of their original identity. But these souls go on to recover, live successful lives, and progress with their spiritual evolution. So their choice of consequence, rather than living multiple lifetimes facing their karma and potentially falling into the same patterns, is that they have to lose about 90% of their identity. And this brings to mind what Howard Storm and I discussed in one of our interviews. It's Howard Storm's belief, based on his near-death experience, that for people who completely surrender to the darkness, that God will have to annihilate their personality, that dark and twisted personality that performed those evil actions, but will be able to salvage and restore their true selves, that spark of the divine in them. And finally, number 3 is solitude. Some severely damaged souls who are uncomfortable with continuing to incarnate into physical lifetimes and also don't want to have 90% of their identity diluted, choose instead to go to a place of solitude and remain there indefinitely. What happens to these souls is outside of the scope of knowledge that Dr. Newton was able to access, but I can imagine that while they are in this solitude, being face to face and completely wrapped up in their own darkness, for an indefinite period of time would be the worst of hells that we could imagine. Now, I do have a firm belief that God is well equipped and well able with the time and resources at his disposal to heal even these souls, and that they will not remain in solitude forever. So what can we take away from all of this? I have 4 points for you. First, we are actually far more mature and self-aware and responsible as spiritual beings than we often realize here. Even the worst of us are at their core divine spirits who wake up and say, oh wow, I really messed that up. So we need to give ourselves some credit. First of all, we are by nature good, brave, and trustworthy. And they say that only the bravest of souls come to earth because it is not easy here. 2, this may be hard for some people to hear, and I understand that, and that's okay. But we are all met with love and understanding when we pass on, no matter who we are. And we have to take into consideration there are so many factors that play into our lives here that we don't necessarily understand from this point of view. Some people that we consider to be very evil may actually be playing a role that was asked of them. Others may be immature souls, young souls who took on too much and ended up succumbing to genetic predispositions or traumatic environments. And we can rest assured that God takes all of these things into consideration. He judges us justly according to our intentions, our environment, what influenced us. Even the most evil among us are loved. Some may be so darkened that they cannot sense this love, but it is still there. There are consequences for actions, but divine love is not vindictive, it is not punitive, it is gentle, it is corrective. 3, free will is honored every step of the way. Even the most evil of souls have options: multiple reincarnations, personality diluting, or stay in solitude where you can't harm anyone. 4, we can trust that God, the universe, the elders, and the guides that are working with each one of us are benevolent, good, wise, just, and capable of handling and helping us to correct our errors. These 2 things can both be true at the same time. God does not judge. He unconditionally understands and loves even the worst among us. And yet, God is just. We are held accountable. And we, most of the time, choose to right our own wrongs and undergo measures to ensure that we will not make the same mistakes. We are living in a good and benevolent universe that is designed to bring out the best in all of us and ultimately to drive us towards expansion in love. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.